welcome to a new video. It's me, Andy. Today I'm on standby. I'm on home standby and I haven't been used. So I was just catching up on some YouTube videos and I was literally just watching Caught Two Flies, how I became a flight attendant journey video, and I thought it was so interesting, and I thought I've never done a video like that before. I mean, not like that many people would care if I did, honestly, but let's just pretend you do. So I thought I'd sit down and talk to you guys about my flight attendant journey and how I got to where I am today. It's kind of a long story because I changed companies a couple of times and I talk a lot, so I might go off on a couple of tangents here and there. I apologize in advance, but here goes nothing. Okay, so back at the end of 2014 was when I decided I wanted to become a flight attendant. When I got back home from spending the year in Europe as an au pair, I decided to start like fully getting down into the details and trying to figure out how I was gonna do that, because I had watched flight attendant vloggers and YouTubers, but majority of them were from the US and others were from like Dubai, flying for Emirates and stuff. There really wasn't a lot of information on the interwebs and the Google about how to be a flight attendant in South Africa, in Mzansi, flying for a South African based airline. I really had such trouble finding the information, and I literally DM'd all of these flight attendant girls who I had seen on like Facebook and Instagram and stuff, and asked them like, can you please just tell me like the steps to become a flight attendant? Like, I'm not asking you to give my CV to your boss, I'm not asking you to get me a job or anything like that. I literally just need to know, where should I start, because I literally have no clue. Out of about 80 DMs that I sent, I think I got like 1 or 2 responses, one of which was a super half-assed response saying, haha, it's a really difficult industry to get into, so good luck. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that information. Luckily, I had gone to high school with this one girl that at the time was flying for one of our local airlines. I'm so glad that she remembered me from high school, because she was about 3 years ahead of me in high school, and so I messaged her and she let me call her, and we were on the phone for about an hour, and she was explaining to me like literally just the basics of what I needed to do, all the steps I needed to take. This conversation would later inspire my very first video that I uploaded on YouTube, how to become a flight attendant in South Africa, because that phone call plus like my first 6 months of finally becoming a flight attendant were the information that I needed, that I wish I could have found in a Google search. I also actually got a hold of someone in the HR department at SAA, our national carrier, and back in 2015 SAA was still like recruiting, they were still doing pretty well, and at that time they were like my dream airline. And I think I just got her when she was in a good mood, because she spoke to me for like 20 minutes answering my questions, but this time from a specific like hiring airline perspective, where she was saying to me like, one of the main things we look out for is customer service experience, and here at SAA majority of the month you'll be home, but you could get a layover in Frankfurt and London and New York, because those are our layovers. But they did also fly around locally here in South Africa, so it was really nice that I just got these 2 very sweet people to just give me the time of day and answer my questions, because honestly without that information I don't think I would have moved forward in my flight attendant journey. Hold on, I need to go and buy groceries. So then I spent the next 2.5, almost 3 years working at a hotel in Underberg, my hometown, saving up money so that I could pay for my course, because unfortunately here in South Africa we have to do a license course thing. We have to go to initial flight attendant training and pay for it ourselves to get our cabin crew license, and then only then do we qualify to apply to jobs for majority of the airlines. There is one specific airline that I know of, and that's AIRLINE, that does recruit crew who don't have a license, but last time I checked that was like 2-3 years ago. I don't know if they still do that or not. The general practice is to just get a cabin crew license so that you have better chances of being hired. So that's what I did. I moved up to Joburg in April, if not May of 2017, and I did my course, here in Johannesburg, and it was a 5 or 6 week course. On week I think 3 or 4, when we were doing our initial ditching, which is when we jump in the pool and, you know, they see if we can swim, if we can support ourselves in a pool of water and stuff. We had this one instructor who came to do the ditching instructing for our class, our training group, and she at the time was working in the like HR cabin services department of a charter company. And I didn't really think much of it. I was just like, oh, that's cool, she's a flight attendant, let me ask her, like, you know, all the good questions and stuff. And then at the end of the day, she actually asked me if I could give her my CV, because she knew that they would be recruiting soon, she just didn't know exactly when, and she wanted to have my CV on file for when the opportunity came up, because she thought I was a good candidate. And guys, it was so exciting to hear something like that. Type of like vote of confidence. I had been to an AIRLINE interview and I was rejected. I had been to one of those Qatar assessment days and I didn't make it through. At that point, I just didn't really know what else to do until I was done with my license. And it was so cool that my first impression, I guess, was good enough that this woman wanted my CV, and I just thought that was amazing. I went home, immediately drew one up and sent it to her that evening, like, because of course I was so excited. Then I continued to do the course and I finished it, completed it, wrote my exam at the CAA, passed that. Then I stayed in Johannesburg for like an extra month or so, looking for jobs, just emailing any and everyone I could possibly email my CV to. And people always ask me like, where do you send your CV to? Can I have your HR's email address? And I'm like, that's public record, dude. Like, just go on their website, go to their careers tab. You will find either an area in the careers tab where you can set up a profile and leave your CV there like they do with AirLink, or you find the HR people's actual email address and you send them an email. So I spent that month literally writing a full list, compiling a full list of all the airlines' email addresses that I could find, and each Friday I would send my CV to every single one of those email addresses over and over and over again. But then in July, I think, I had to go back home. I had to go back to Underberg because I had run out of money. There was nothing else I could do. It was expensive to be living here. I had to pay rent and I was just job searching. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was not letting anything get in my way of possibly getting this flight attendant job. I literally spent a couple of days going to the airport and slipping my CV under every single door of the airline offices and stuff like that. Like, I was determined that this was not going to go any other way but that I would become a flight attendant. So even if the offices literally had a poster outside saying, we are not hiring, please do not leave your CV, I would still leave it. Of course I did. And I even left my CV with a couple of ground handling companies. Yeah, at some point I had to say goodbye, go back home, and just help my parents out at home. So about 2 weeks into being back at home and living with my parents and being a broke, unemployed 24-year-old, I got an SMS from Bid Air, one of the ground handling companies that I had applied to, that I was gonna have an interview. But the thing about that was, it was 5 p.m. Thursday evening when they sent me this SMS, and the interview was for 11 a.m. on Friday morning in Johannesburg, and I was 9 hours away on a farm in Underberg at the time. I freaked out so much, but I showed my dad and he was like, just drive. Just start driving, like, you want the job, don't you? Yeah, I drove all night. My sister did come with me, but she had just gotten her wisdom teeth taken out, so she was less than useless during that drive. I drove all night to this Bid Air interview, and mind you, this was gonna be a ground handling job. I would have been working as a check-in agent for a few of the local airlines as well as Emirates. That's what my job would have been. I would not have been working as a flight attendant, but my mindset throughout my entire journey becoming a flight attendant was, as long as I get my foot in the door, I'll find a way to become a flight attendant at some point. And for the interview, I had gotten zero sleep by the time I got to the interview. I quickly went to the apartment that I used to stay at, have a quick shower. I was lucky enough that my landlord let me just go by just to have a shower, get ready for my interview. There was about 10 of us at the interview, and at some point I was chatting to this one girl and she was complimenting me on my makeup, and I was like, thank you so much, because I feel so tired. Like, you should be able to see the like dark circles under my eyes because I haven't slept tonight. And so I told her how I'd driven all the way from Underberg all night just for this interview, and I think that she mentioned it to our interviewer because she went in just before me, and when she was done, he came out with her and he was like, okay, which one of you was crazy enough to drive all night just for this interview? And I was like, me. It's crazy that that's what impressed him so much, because he offered me the job on the spot. This was a job that was going to be paying me 6,000 rand a month, and I'm not one to think that there's ever a job that I'm too good for, so I was more than happy with that salary. I would have made it work. I can confidently say that I know that getting your foot in the door is a good move, because the airline that I currently fly for does hire ground staff. So they kind of hire in cycles. They hire complete outsiders with cabin crew license with like no flying experience, and then on the next cycle they'll hire crew who have flying experience, and then on the next cycle they'll hire from the ground staff who have cabin crew licenses. So they always do it in cycles. I need to sit down, the story is taking forever. On my first day of training with Bid Air, it was Monday morning, during our like second lesson around like 10 a.m. I got an email from the previously mentioned charter company that lady that had done the ditching with us worked for. I got an email from her saying that I'm invited for an interview for the next day at, I don't know, was it 9 a.m? I can't remember. I was so beyond myself. I was so excited, you have no idea. I went to speak to my instructor at Bid Air, and they were like, well, what are you still doing here? Go home, go do your research, go get ready for this interview. And that's one of the things that I appreciate so much about these ground handling companies, and like especially like Bid Air and Menzies. They understand that a lot of the people working there are working there as a stepping stone into becoming flight crew, whether you're working to become a pilot or a flight attendant or an engineer or whatever. They understand that, and they actually encourage us to go for it. Yeah, I went home, I did my research, I did all the things that I've mentioned in previous interview prep videos. I learned as much as I could about this company. The next day I had my interview with them. This interview, it meant so much to me, because it was my first flight attendant interview. What I had moved to Joburg for, it was what I had worked for the previous 3 years, you know. I went for this interview, and this interview, the way it worked was you first got an exam that you had to write, and you had to get over 90% for this exam before you were invited in to actually sit with the interviewers. I did the exam, and I think I only got one question wrong, because I didn't know at the time what a TL3B was. During initial training we had only called it a cabin defect logbook. I had no idea that it had a different name, but I digress. Passed my exam, and then I went into the interview, and it was a good interview. A few days later I got the email offering me the job. My first day of training with this charter company was on the 14th of August 2017. So from the time that I did my initial license and I got my first flying job was about 3 months. So I'm exceptionally lucky. I just want to note that that's not a typical timeline. So yeah, I worked for them. It was great, but the only thing that I was nervous about, that was constantly playing in the back of my mind, was the fact that that company worked on a 1-year contract, and at the end of the year you could either be offered a permanent position there if they had the need for another flight attendant on a permanent basis, if they had enough contracts that they were making money from, that they needed more crew to work and fly and stuff. It was constantly in the back of my mind, like, what if I'm not offered a permanent position at the end of this year? Like, what am I gonna do? So in February 2018 I was invited to an interview for my first airline. Oh, it was such a blessing to even be called in for that interview, honestly, because I've always loved them, and this would have been a permanent position, so I didn't think it would hurt. I went in for that interview, and at the time they were recruiting crew who already had flying experience. That interview went really well. I felt quite confident with that interview, honestly, and I heard back about a week later that they were offering me the job, and so I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I spoke to my manager at the charter company, and I was like, you guys don't offer permanent. I don't know where I'm gonna be here in 6 months, so this might be the safer option for me, you know. And she wished me well, and I left and I started at the airline. The training was good. My training group was awesome. Once I started flying, I started to hate it. I didn't start hating being a flight attendant, and I didn't start hating the airline. I started hating my experience that I was having, because the base that I was based out of was OR Tambo, the main international airport here in Joburg, and it was at the time so busy. Like, our flying schedule was so hectic, like no wonder they were recruiting, and I was constantly exhausted, And on top of that, I had a bad experience with the crew I was flying with. I just don't know, like I seem to have been unlucky with the crew I was flying with, because a lot of them were like really snarky. I just was not having a good time. But also I feel like I was still such a new flight attendant that I wasn't confident in myself yet. So then in June, July, I think, the charter company that I had previously flown for, my manager there actually reached out to me and she was like, listen, we're getting like a whole bunch of contracts right now. I really desperately need crew, especially people who are already familiar with this aircraft. So would you want to come back? You're gonna go on a lot of contract, which we all know means you're gonna make a lot of extra money. See, this is the thing that like I beat myself up for this, because as much as I weighed the pros and cons of each situation every time I left a specific company, I honestly don't think that I thought about it well enough, or as much as I should have, because I feel like this is where things started to go downhill. Yeah, I decided I'll go, and luckily this airline was super supportive. My management was super great, and I explained to them that like I really wanted to do charter for a little bit, just so that I could save up as much money as possible. Sorry, my camera cut. So I wanted to leave because I wanted to save as much money as possible. Not only that, I just felt that if there was ever a time for me to fly charter and be out of the country like 6 to 8 months out of the year, it was better at a time when I wasn't married and didn't have children or any other like super serious responsibilities. That's what happened. I went back to the charter company again, still on just a 1-year contract, and again that was the biggest worry for me. I literally left a permanent job for a chance to just fly around Africa and make a little bit of extra money, basically, which at the time seemed worth it. At the time it seemed worth it, but in retrospect, no, I shouldn't have done that. I had a lot of fun in that year that I was flying for that charter company. I vlogged so much of that. You guys saw me in Chad and Gabon, all those places, going on those charters. It was a lot of fun. But June 2019 came and the company had lost a few contracts and they couldn't afford to keep the handful of us cabin crew who weren't permanent at the time. So got laid off and didn't have a job. So I was back to being unemployed. I was back to job searching. I've since privated the video, but for those of you who were around at the time, you saw I vlogged the day that I went to interview for like a cruise company, and I got a different flight attendant job at a different charter company. Now this charter company was offering me a permanent position. I was so excited about it. Training was cool, but we hit a bit of a hiccup there that I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it. Well, I mean, I probably am, but I just don't feel comfortable talking about it. But basically shit hit the fan and I found myself unemployed again, which was easily like the worst part, toughest few months that I've had since I started flying. One thing I always try to remember is that it's who you know, and it's good to make friends, and it's good to not burn your bridges when you leave a specific company. My airline, the one that was the first airline I flew for, they at the time needed part-time flight attendants, and this was only a couple of weeks after I got laid off. So I was extremely lucky that my manager called me up, asked me if I was available, and I jumped on that chance. I love that airline so much. They are the airline that I currently fly for. At the time, back in the end, I think this was like September 2019, I was only flying for them on a part-time basis. What was nice was that I got to fly for them out of Lanseria, which is the smaller airport here in Johannesburg. It's a smaller base and there was only about 20 flight attendants there versus like the 100 that we probably have at OR Tambo. So it was really nice. It was a small base. It was a close, small group of crew. Even the schedule wasn't as hectic as it had been before. So I had a much better time this time, but also I feel like within myself, I by that point knew exactly who I was. I knew exactly what I did and didn't want out of life. I was much more confident in my uniqueness, I'm gonna call it. Yeah, it was a much better experience for me. Early March, they offered me a permanent position, this being March 2020. I was so excited and so happy. It was like such a weight off my shoulders. And then like 3 days later we went into lockdown because of COVID. Wow, this is like me speaking the story and like telling you guys about it just tells me, it reminds me of how insane this chain of events has been. I'm so happy. They are honestly the greatest. The flying has been chilled. I mean, because we're recovering from COVID, it hasn't been a super hectic. So yeah, I've honestly really loved being back at this airline. They are amazing. The fact that nobody got laid off during COVID is something that just makes me feel so lucky, because not everybody has been that lucky. Work with really good, amazing people. That includes the crew that I have since met, and that includes the passengers that I get to meet every day on my flights. I think that's it. That's my story. I'm sure that everyone that started watching this video has already clicked off by now, but if you're still watching this, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Comment something, I don't know, comment something completely random, like a sunflower emoji. Yeah, do that. If you're still watching at this point, please do that. That'll be so cute. Like, that'll be so cool. I did warn you that this was gonna be a long video. I hope I didn't bore you to death. I just thought it would be cool to share this and kind of get the timeline together, you know, for those of you that have been here for a while and might have missed a few videos or a few life updates. And it's also a great way for me to just look back on and see how far I've come and stuff like that, because, you know, my memory might fail me at some point. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and don't forget to spread good vibes and be kind, and I'll see you guys all on the next video, which I promise will be shorter than this. Bye guys.